Hey, Artie.
How's it going?
Not bad. Yourself?
Doing okay.
Okay, great. Look at that. We got 4 people already. We haven't even started. Thank you, 4 people. Yeah, Artie, thank you very much for doing this. I'm really happy. So
I am delighted.
So we can share, we can co-host this. And as I said to you before, this was I think a selfish endeavor on my part because I want to learn. I want to know what's going on. You know, sometimes, especially NATO symbols, when you see a NATO symbol, just the NATO symbol itself, but then on top there could be circles, or at the bottom there could be circles, and there could be X's, and then there's 5 X's. Yeah.
So you're going to be terrified one day when you turn to try to play the Grand Tactical series from Multiman Publishing, which uses not NATO symbols, but the period-appropriate NATO symbols for each nationality.
Oh, my God, yeah. No.
Which in the case of the U.S. are similar, but not identical to NATO symbols. And for the Germans, they're completely mystifying.
So that Decision Games, it's like that.
This is Multiman. But it's so in that particular case, it actually doesn't matter because everything else you need to know is like coded into the factors on. But like the Longest Day was like that. It used period symbology instead of what we call standard NATO symbols, which is not exactly what it is, but it's derived from the standard NATO symbology.
Now, who's the designer of that game?
Originally Adam Starkweather, if we're talking about the Grand Tactical series.
Yeah. Now, is there a reason you think that Adam Starkweather did something like that? That's interesting. Why would he do that? For aficionados?
I think so. I think it's neat. But my position on it before I played it was that was just going to be too confusing. I don't know what any of those things are. I mean, there's literally a unit symbol on there, a German unit symbol for a marching band. That's like an actual unit in the game. It was a SS marching band that was like thrown into the line during Operation Market Garden. So it adds a lot of like historical flavor, but does that outweigh the amount of confusion that you're handing the player? Well, in the case of GTS, it doesn't actually matter because what you want to know off the counter is not the symbol. What you want to know is the fire type, which is a colored number on the counter. So what color it is will tell you how the unit behaves rather than the unit type.
Yeah, but what about the numbers in the unit?
I mean, you have like a strength factor as well, but the strength factor is just the number, is the number itself, right? The fire type is the color.
And does that change between a grand strategy, operational, battalion, tactical?
It does in this case because, so I mean, in an operational or strategic game, you're not typically going to differentiate between different types of fire. Maybe you have like artillery fire versus like a direct fire, like a standard combat factor versus a barrage factor. But if you have like a strategic game, probably you just have a factor, and it's a strength factor that represents the fire, everything about the unit, the firepower, the unit cohesion, all that stuff.
That's funny. Yeah, you're talking. Sorry, go ahead, Artie.
GTS is a company level game, so when
you say GTS, you're saying Grand Tactical Strategy,
Grand Tactical Series, a specific series of games from Multiman Publishing.
Okay,
that happens to use confusing symbols.
Well, like. How many of these type of games are there really? Grand Tactical, a Grand Strategy series. How many have been made
in that series?
Yeah.
4, 5, 5. The 2 Market Garden games, The Devil's Cauldron and Where Eagles Dare. Then there's another game called No Question of Surrender, which is an engagement in North Africa. And then there's The Greatest Day, Gold, Juno, and Sword Beach, which is huge.
MMP,
game.
Right?
Yes,
MMP?
These are all MMP.
Okay.
And then there's Operation Mercury, which is the assault on Crete in 1940. I think it's 1940. Which I haven't touched. So other than to punch it, I punched it. And then Starkweather then later parts ways with for whatever reason that was, with Multiman, and goes over to Compass, where he does the CSS, the company scale series or company scale system, which is a related but not identical series of games covering very different topics. The GTS games are all like stock West Front stuff, or Med in the case of No Question of Surrender and Operation Mercury, where the CSS games have been all over the place. The first three were like Pacific Island games, and those are actually the ones I have.
Hey, I'm going to call out some people here. Viper Dave, Tony, where are you, man?
Tony is, well, yeah, what? That's like Tony the missing persons. Put an all points bulletin out for Tony.
Jester's looking for you, man. Kenneth Gilbert, how are you? Beat Cafe, Chet Bell. I like that name, Chet. Chet, you play trumpet? Kevin and Stephen Roberts. You know what? I'm going to... I have lined up here a few designers that are going to be giving their 1 minute or 1 minute and a half, 2 minutes, let's say, opinion on, and here goes, what is a war game? I figured, why not start with something like this? And Artie, if a guy like John Butterfield talks about Twilight Imperium and calls that a war game, who are we to argue against John Butterfield?
So here's the thing, and I've been over this on my channel a lot. I'm a snob by disposition, right? It's my first instinct. My knee-jerk reaction is to say, that's not a war game. How dare you consider that a war game, you peasant?
But who cares?
But exactly. I mean, it's ultimate. But then when you start getting into the weeds of defining what a war game is, you're going to define a war game however you want, but that's the point. Everybody defines it however they want. And somebody like I years ago saw Marco Arnauto's definition of what he thinks a war game is. Marco's definition is that if when he plays it, he feels like he's playing a war game, it's a war game.
That's it. That's it.
I can't argue with that.
Nope.
Now does that work for me in all cases? No, but who cares? That's me. And also it doesn't, just we're also inclined, some people are inclined, depending on the delivery, to interpret someone saying that's not a war game to mean that is actually crap. And normally that's not what we mean when we say that, but sometimes some people state it more aggressively than others.
You're right. But you being an intelligent human being and knowing all this crap, you're still an elitist.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a snob by natural demeanor, actually, about everything, not just war games. It has a tendency that in some areas I fight it, and in some areas I embrace it.
Well, okay, you know what? Let's go. I'm going to put up, because today I have control. What Artie and I are going to do is 1 week it's going to be on my channel. The next week it's going to be on his channel, so we can share in the millions of dollars that we're going to make on this.
Yes.
The millions.
The big money.
So you know what? Let's start off with personally and correct me if I'm wrong, the grognard of all grognards I would call alive is Dean Essig. Am I wrong?
Sure. I mean, I think Dean is definitely in the category of people that you could say that about.
Yeah, because I asked him once if he ever played a Euro. He said he saw one from across the table.
Dean may have been pulling your leg there. I
saw one across the table.
So I was in the same room as one that was being played at one point. But I did not go over to that table due to the overwhelming stench.
That's just insane anyways.
So
I'm gonna play Dean's message, and I think what's gonna happen is that we're gonna flake on one side and Dean's gonna be in the middle type thing.
Okay.
So let's see what happens here with Dean. Here we go.
Hi, this is Dean Essig. I was asked to define what a war game is. First rule of thumb would be to avoid being too rigid about what a war game entails. It cannot obviously be just about war, just about military history, just about history in general. So you can't limit those. A lot of people do limit the way what a game is based on the two words. I find that the most important definition involves two things. The first thing is that it's some sort of simulation of reality. If you do this, you get this other result that is based on hopefully somebody's real understanding of real life and spits out an answer to you that has some sense with what you chose to do. The choices you have make sense with what a real commander, prince, potentate, what have you, can do. And the results spit out the way they would. This should build into a tree that keeps going, where you can continue to play and keep getting new situations that you have to resolve that fit in properly. Now, obviously, there are limits, but the second feature that a war game has to have is be a game. It really needs to be something that actually does do things based on what you choose to do, and not just tell you the story like you're reading a book. If you wanted to read a book, you can read a book, but a war game should give you situations and help you find out what they're like based on what you do. As the old adage goes, you are in command, and literally that's very true. Have a great day.
I have tremendous sympathy for that definition of war games because it aligns with my tastes fairly closely. I prefer games with what I call high simulation value, and that is in line with what Dean is saying.
Okay,
but at the same time, it's got to be, you have to have decision-making ability too. This means that something like B-17 Queen of the Skies, is that not a war game? Because you make almost no decisions playing that game. And I think everybody would consider, everybody that would participate in this discussion would consider it a war game based on precedent, if nothing else.
Well, theme.
Yeah, theme, but it's theme enough, right? I mean, is U-Boat a war game, right? I mean, I said no. The Charles S. Roberts Awards disagreed thoroughly.
Yeah, that's to be how do you say, revisited. But hold on a second. Why isn't U-Boat a war game?
Because I don't think that it's. I think the theme is all it has that makes it a war game. I don't think it has any simulation, which is not to say it's bad, but I don't think it has any simulation value, and I don't think you, as the player, this is the other thing that Dean said, is that there has to be some kind of map between decisions that the player makes in the game and decisions that were made in the history. And I don't think that maps, based on my understanding of U-Boat, a game I have not played, which I understand is a lot of fun. I don't believe that it meets that second criteria.
So you're saying it has to be historical?
No, I'm saying there has to be a level at which you, the player, are making decisions that are similar in tenor to the decisions that were made historically. You don't have to have made the same decisions. And in fact, if you make all the same decisions, I'm not sure why you're not reading a book. Unless you're just testing it as a simulation, in which case even I do not have the patience to do that.
Well, I mean, I agree with Matthew, what's on the screen there. But in all fairness, I asked Dean to give me a 2-minute summary. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost unfair, but you know what I'm saying? Is Aces of Aces a war game?
Great question.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Actually, I would tend to think it is.
I think so.
I've never played it. It's an ancient game. I remember it on the shelves of the old hobby store back in the 80s with the little booklets and stuff, but I've never played it. It still gets played though, I can tell you that. I would say sure, based on my understanding. So the way it works is it's a World War I biplane on biplane game, and you have a booklet that has different pages that are different maneuvers that you can make in the plane. And your opponent has another booklet, and you pick a maneuver, and he picks a maneuver, and then depending on what the two of you pick, something happens. There you go.
But
so that is a fancy new edition.
Well, at the end result is you're shooting down a guy. You're trying to kill him. So if you're trying to kill someone,
but you're making decisions that the pilot would make, right? you're making bank left or dive or whatever, right? You're making the same kinds of decisions. The to put it in fancy person speak, the game is putting you in a similar decision space to the decision space occupied by the historical participants, whether that's a pilot or a general or whatever. And I think that at some level that is necessary.
Here's Barton. Artie, here's another guy with a hard head.
I mean, my personal preference is for hex and counter games. I make no secret about that, but there's plenty of games that are indisputable war games that aren't hex and counter.
Artie, what about area control or point to point?
Yeah. I mean, there's been point to point. I mean, okay, Avalon Hills Gettysburg didn't come on a hex grid at first; it was on a square grid like a chessboard. Does that make it not a war? I mean, I don't think that anybody can make that case, right? So I think, I mean, as a personal rule of thumb, that's fine. But as a workable criteria to base your definition on, I don't think it works.
Trevor is asking, is Magic the Gathering a war game? Absolutely.
I don't think so.
I think so.
I mean, okay.
Well, hold on a second. There's something... There's something that DCB said here that I said before. Yeah, just trying to kill someone doesn't make it a war game. Right,
yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, The Sims, the video game The Sims.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's just, I think we would be hard-pressed to find someone who thinks that is a war game. And yet, there are people who play that by trying to kill their little sim people that are walking.
Yeah, okay. I stand corrected.
So you're right. That this statement, just trying to kill someone doesn't make a war game, is correct. I mean, it's more obvious if the topic is historical, but it doesn't have to be historical either. There's been the long precedent of science fiction and fantasy war games that, again, no one argued at the time whether they were war games or not. Well, somebody did, but that person was a jerk. So. I also don't want to exclude potential categories of players either. If we have somebody, I mean, we've got a local game club here. If we didn't have a pandemic, they'd be meeting this weekend. And there's a guy up there who religiously goes up there every week to play Twilight Struggle and Combat Commander. That's what he plays. That's it. I mean, you could bully him into playing like ASL starter kit or something, but what he goes up there to play is Twilight Struggle and Combat Commander. And those are games I don't really want to play, but I'm not going to say this guy's not a war gamer. He doesn't go up there to play. He will occasionally also be bullied into Carcassonne or something like that, but that's he wants to play Twilight Struggle and Combat Commander, right? So
now Combat Commander, which I like because it's a great game. It's not a war game for you, Artie?
No, I think it's totally a war game. I just don't like it. There's a clear distinction between at least I can draw. And again, it's you have to communicate this if you're saying this kind of stuff between games I like on the one hand, not all of which are war games, and games that are war games, right? And games that are, there's a third category we should have a Venn diagram for this actually. Of games that are legitimate crap. There are examples of that. But I don't think Combat Commander falls into that category. I just don't like it. But it's totally a war game. That doesn't, I mean, I don't have to like every war game. That's not in my contract.
No, you're right. And it's funny, I was going to ask David Thompson, because he's on the chat. I was going to ask him, David, let me know if you want to pop in and give your 2 minutes opinion on what you think a war game is. And the reason why I'm giving you 2 minutes, David, is because I gave everybody else 2 minutes. And Artie, as a matter of fact, you want me to put Herman on?
Oh, sure. You can put Herman on. I'd love to hear what David has to say too, actually.
Okay, so David, let me know. If you're into it, I'll send you the link. So I got Herman saying, what is a war game? And would you, when you hear the name Herman Lutman, do you think war game designer?
I do, because the games I have played that Herman has designed are the Blind Swords games, and those are totally war games. Maybe the zombie things are too, but I haven't played those, so I don't know.
Okay, so here I'm going to put up Herman.
Hey, this is Herman Lutman. So what is a war game? Well, that question's been asked by gamers for centuries. For me, my personal opinion is it's any game that has conflict simulation. So if you have strategy, if you have tactics, if you have combat, if you have conflict, that qualifies it as a war game. It's not always just the historical hex encounter games, but can be expanded out to everything, almost everything. Fantasy, science fiction. So for example, one of my favorite games is Summoner Wars, which has wars in the title, so de facto it is a war game. But other than that, it's actually a tactical skirmish miniatures game that uses cards and a square grid and has tons of strategy and tactics, has wonderful competing factions that are asymmetric. And by all definitions, it's a war game. And I would imagine that any grognard that would play the game with me would agree. It is a fantastic war game. Has fantasy armies, nothing historical about it, but it definitely qualifies in my book as a war game. And I think that extends to dungeon crawlers and adventure games and science fiction games and horror games. So for me, war game, conflict simulation, that's the bottom line. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a hex encounter war game, but includes that subset as well. Thanks.
And again, I have complete sympathy with that definition.
Well,
so Peter Bergs is asking, what about sci-fi stuff is a historical background required for it to be a war game? I say no. I mean, and if I can prove it to you, if Redmond Simonson says it's a war game, it's a war game. I'm talking about SPI's Star Force. Completely science fictional thing, and actually a really interesting science fictional treatment of the topic too, for that matter. But I bet I'm gonna argue with Redmond Simonson or Jim Dunnigan says it's a war game. Come on.
No, and that's what I said. Hey, David, thanks for coming on there.
David,
how's it going, guys?
And
doing all right.
Artie just said that because Redmond Simonson or Jim Dunnigan says it's a war game, it's a war game. Coming back to my question, Artie, of asking you, what the hell was I going to ask you? What was I saying?
I mean, that's an argument from authority.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't care.
Okay, yeah. So David Thompson, if David Thompson says Twilight Imperium, Twilight Struggle is a war game, well, he's a war game designer just like Jim Dunnigan or Redmond Simonson. So why don't we jump on his bandwagon and say, he said it's a war game, I believe it, it's a war game.
They might have a smidge more credibility, just
at least more seniority, anyway.
Just a smidge.
Okay, okay, Dave, we're gonna listen to you, man, and you're talking.
Yeah. So pretty much whatever Herman said is the answer, right? I'll go with what he says, but I mean, I think I just joined in, so I saw what Herman's argument was, and I think that's pretty much right. I think he might have a slightly more general, like or generous, I don't know that, like Summoner Wars, I might not categorize as a war game, right? Because it is about conflict and it's where you draw the line. To me, well, let me say personally, I prefer my war games to be historical. Now, I'm not saying that sci-fi and post-apocalyptic and stuff can't be a war game. They are, but that's just my preference. It's Star Wars Legion on behind me, so I would say our minis, tabletop games, those are war games, right? So if it's a conflict simulation, just like Herman said, that's the description, right? If you're trying to simulate conflict, right, that's a war game. And so there's a lot of gray area, right, in some of those places, but I'm pretty happy with being generous with the description. Twilight Struggle, I think, is a war game.
I saw Artie move as soon as you said Twilight Struggle. He twitched. No, but you did. Yeah.
I totally did, because it's a game that, because I think strictly based on the basis that it's super, super popular, it's the game that we tend to use as the example of this edge case that some people will argue about whether it's a war game or not. And my feeling is that the entire question is misplaced. And I don't think that we have it's not a switch where we switch it one way and it's a war game, and we switch it the other way and it's not a war game anymore. It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
On one end of which you have stuff that's not at all like a war game, and on the other side you have games that are very much like a war game. And Twilight Struggle tends to be sort of in the general middle of that, right? And you know, we talk and figure out where any given game lies on that spectrum, but it's not a binary choice, right? It's not a war game. It's either a war game or not, unless it's U-Boat, in which case it's just not.
I think Artie, you're 100% right, man, because like clearly there is a spectrum, and clearly Twilight Struggle somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, because we debate all the time about whether it is or isn't, right? So
we also like to argue.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, but we're not arguing here. We're discussing.
Well, we're discussing, but somewhere there's people arguing about this exact question today.
Yeah, truth. Well, I'll tell you this: if my personal position is that if there's somebody out there who's getting into board games, or maybe they've been into Euros or whatever, and they're dabbling in Twilight Struggle, and you say, and if you say, hey, I'm going to make my personal definition of war games just a little bit broader to grab a few more people and bring them into our hobby and bring them farther to our hex encounter end of the spectrum and show them some goodness. Man, let's make the definition as broad as possible.
I know, but I mean, we're dealing with war gamers here. So no, look, Artie he said he's an elitist, even though he knows he's wrong. I'm just
except about U-Boat. There, I will make no concession.
What do you think, David? What do you think? Do you think U-Boat's a war game? War game?
Okay, so here's the deal. This is what I was going to do flippantly, Dan. I was going to bring on my 7-year-old son, and I was going to say, this is a game, and it's about war, right? So is it a war game? And he's going to say yes. So that's, I mean, yes, it meets those two criteria. It is a game, and it's about a war-related topic, so it is a war game, right? I mean, we can. What is it more, right? Is it something more than it's a war game? Probably, probably that is true. And so, if we're going to say it has to be a game can only fall into one category, then maybe it's something more than it's a war game.
It's funny what Matthew says here, and it's true. Most war gamers will play anything.
Not me.
Well, hold on. You said Carcassonne before. Have you played Carcassonne?
I have played Carcassonne. And
it's a great game.
It's okay. It's not something I'm going to seek out a game of. God, I never wake up on Saturday morning and say, boy, I can't wait to go up to the club and play Carcassonne this weekend. That's going to be awesome. I never wake up like that.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Hey, some people say that, man. Anyway,
but there's nothing wrong with it. It's a fine game.
No.
Yeah.
So if I ask my fiance, I said, hey, Chantal, you want to play? I don't know, Fire in the Lake. It's a war game. Nah. Hey, Chantal, right away. You want to play Root? Sure.
It's got cute animals.
It's a coin game.
I have not played Root either, but
it's a coin game.
I do. It has been described as a coin-like game. I haven't played it, so I don't feel. I mean, the Expanse board game has also been described as a coin-like game, and I found that a little bit unconvincing upon review of the game too. But that doesn't mean it doesn't borrow coin elements. I mean, coin is an engine at this point that a lot of designers are drawing on to one extent or another.
I'm cool with calling Root a war game. I don't know that I don't personally think it's as coin-like as many people would claim it is. Right?
I think the people that say that don't play coin games.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly it's asymmetric, and sure it's but there's no opportunity to really. I kind of call a BS flag.
Well, hold on a second. Somebody called Root a war game.
It's called that all the time.
Been a war gamer. A coin game, I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't. It can certainly borrow elements from coin. I'm not familiar enough with Root to talk about it intelligently, But I mean, there's a lot going on in coin, right? So there's a lot of things to borrow. Or when we say that, are we talking about multiple asymmetric factions? Because that's a characteristic of coin games, right? But coin is not the only place you see that inspiration. For me, I think that the central mechanic is actually the card draw the card draw and action mechanism, where you draw a card, you take that card as the turn, and then you can see the next card that is the next turn.
Totally agree, and that's not at all in coin. I mean, in Root, right? Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said. Yes, it has 4 asymmetric factions, but guess what? That's at this point, if your game doesn't have asymmetry in it, you know, people.
We call that boring.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to play my last recorded vid. Dave, if you want to stick around, you're more than welcome, okay?
Grumpy Gamer, we should call that Fire in the Furries.
Where is he? Where is he?
He says they should replace the cubes with meeples in Fire in the Lake.
Yeah.
Call it Fire in the Furries.
You know, whatever. So I'm gonna play the last video, and it's John Butterfield telling us his opinion on what is a war game. Okay, guys, I'm gonna slap it on right now.
On Dan's question, what is a war game? So it's a war game if the subject is war, at any scale, from the U.S. Civil War down to a firefight in the hedgerows of Normandy. Do you win the game by achieving victory in a war or a military battle? Then it's a war game. The mechanics, hex-based, card-driven, blocks, area control, don't matter. So I think we can agree that Wing Leader is a war game and Wingspan is not. But as they get closer together, where do we draw the line? 2 examples. The game Polis covers trade, economic development, politics, culture during the time of the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. But war is just one of the ways you could win that game. You need prestige to win, and there's many ways to get it. Polis is not a war game because of that. Then there's the excellent game Pericles by Mark Herman. It's also Athens versus Sparta during the Peloponnesian War with political and cultural activities. But here, politics and culture are things you do to help your side win the war, and thus the game. So Pericles is a war game. My opinion. Back to you, Dan.
Well, I'm not going to argue with John Butterfield.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
he said, I think the magic line in that definition, which is where do you draw the line? And everybody is going to we have that spectrum, and somewhere in the middle, there's a line. Where's my line versus where Dan's line versus where David's line is the question.
And it's funny because I don't really care about this question. If I like the game, I'm gonna play the game. And if I'm fighting with you and it's a war game, I'll call it a war game. I don't care. But like you said, Artie, some people use it to denigrate other games, man.
So here's my philosophical statement on that. I don't have time to play or engage in the things that I like, which means that I definitely do not have time to take a dump on the things that other people like. So when I might say, and I try to be clear about this, don't always come off this way, but I try to be clear when I don't like something, I say, I don't like that, which is why I said, I don't like Combat Commander. That does not mean it is bad. I don't think U-Boat is a war game. That does not mean it is bad either. Those people who are enjoying that, I say without any pretense or non-facetiously, have fun playing that game.
Of course.
Great. Go ahead. I'm glad you're having fun with that. And frankly, for something like Combat Commander, there's a chance that somebody who's enjoying themselves in Combat Commander might find themselves in a year having the time of their life in OCS. So, and I'm all for that, or whatever, right? Hardcore hex encounter game.
Now, okay, now you just said OCS. Now, Combat Commander is a tactical game. Why did you go operational all of a sudden in comparison? I don't understand.
Because I play it twice a week, and it's ready to hand at all times. It's just something that we play. There's a very thriving OCS community here in Columbus, Ohio. And I personally feel, I think that I only have room for like one tactical, like at least modern-ish, say 20th century tactical game, like World War II in general era tactical game. I really only have room for one in my repertoire. Other people might completely disagree with that and play 5 or 6 different ones, and that's fine. I only have room for one, which is why I went with ASL.
Now, and you know what, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong there, what he just said, he only has room for one. Is it because you've been prejudiced by the huge thing that is ASL, that you said, look, I'm not going to get into another tactical system because I don't want to relive this again? That hugeness, not only ASL has that hugeness.
Yeah, well, so that might be a factor, to be honest about it. There's also the chasing your own investment factor of I have spent a shitload of money on ASL, so I am going to continue being. And I mean, we were making noise about playing. There's actually a local ASL group here too that I was like just starting to go to the things, and then we had a pandemic. So 2020 has ruined a number of things for me. But so I got out of war games in say the mid 2000s, say around 2005, because it felt to me at the time like there was no wargaming actually happening. And you know, as far as I could see at the time, like I would go to Origins. Well, none of the wargame publishers were going to Origins anymore. Multiman wasn't there. The Multiman wasn't even a thing back. They were, but they weren't substantial back then. GMT had stopped coming as, you know, as their own booth to Origins at the time. I had stopped going to Gen Con. So I knew, because I was in Cleveland at the time, that one of the biggest ASL events in the world is in Cleveland every year in October. I knew that was still happening. So it seemed to me like wargaming was dying, and the only thing left hanging on was ASL. So when I got back in, which would have been about 2010 or 2012, I think, the first thing I thought of was to go get ASL again, right? Because I knew that was, without even checking, I knew that would still be a happening scene. And then I came on YouTube and saw, hey, there's look at this STUKAJOE guy. He's doing awesome wargaming content. And found out that among other people, right? Calandale was doing content back then as well. The Lonesome Gamer, Callus Model, was still doing content back then. Derek Case was doing content. A bunch of people were doing I mean, you know, it's a small pond, right? So that surprised me that there was still a scene. And in retrospect, what ended up happening was wargaming transitioned from being like the big multi-purpose convention event into smaller, much smaller, dedicated events in a wargaming space, like the Consim World Expo and Avalon Con, which eventually turned into WBC. And ASL Oktoberfest, for that matter, which is just ASL, but and those people are intense, let me tell you.
Dave, are you an ASL fan?
Well, I've never played it. So I know, you know, here's my thing with ASL. There used to be a podcast called Rally in the Valley. Do you guys
I remember that.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's still happening.
No, it doesn't. They've killed it, right? And so they've even deleted the old podcasts, I believe.
Oh, that's too bad.
It's too bad, but I mean, I found it super interesting in the same way that I would love to go and watch Artie and his crew play OCS. I would just love to watch them. I don't necessarily need to learn to play it. And I'm being totally genuine when I say that. I would love to, because what was the name of the Buckeye Game Fest, right? Yeah. I wanted to go to Buckeye Game Fest where they had a room set up, and I just want to go watch them. In the same respect, I love listening and reading about ASL, but I don't necessarily, I don't have the time to learn and be able to play ASL, right? Realistically, I just know I don't.
No, nobody does.
Yeah. And so, and Dan, you asked about, you know, these almost like, if you want to call it like a lifestyle game, right? Like OCS and ASL. I think they're more likely to be those kind of games, right? If you're an ASL player, you're more likely to only play 1 or 2 games. Yeah. But I think there's like 3 broad categories of players. There's super casual players that just kind of, they're not as into the hobby as we are necessarily. There's players who are lifestyle players. They pick 1 or 2 games and that's their game. And then there's like people that just float from system to system, play a game 3 or 4 times and move on, right?
Now,
and so, yeah, I'm definitely more in that latter category.
Me too.
Now, Artie, why do a lot of people say what Peter's saying over here? It's not for me. Isn't it a war game? Isn't it?
Oh,
isn't
sure.
it a tactical war? Isn't it fun? Don't you shoot? Isn't it an opportunity fire, line of sight?
Yeah, ASL has all of those things. And,
Okay, yeah.
And maybe all of those things is too much. I would say that if you feel that way about ASL, maybe you want to try, if you're so interested, try the starter kit, because some people don't move on from the starter kit. They just keep playing the starter kit. It's way easier to learn, that's for sure.
Well, then why not play squad leader instead of advanced squad leader?
There's a lot of differences between the old squad leader and the starter kit. The starter kit is ASL. It's not squad leader. It's ASL with all the confusing terrain types removed, all the confusing rules removed. Then you don't have night battles, and you don't have tunnels, you don't have airdrops, and you don't have amphibious landings, and you don't have any of these rules that really complicate the game and really bloat that enormous rule book. It is ASL boiled down to here's how you move, here's how you shoot stuff, here's how leadership works.
Now, okay, now explain to me, Artie, why you said all the terrain, all the different terrains are moved away. Now, why is that complex to have terrain?
Because some of the so ASL has, I don't know, I don't have the book in front of me, 40 or 50 different terrain types. And that becomes more if you go to like the Pacific, where like you might interpret the map as a Pacific map, in which case this woods is actually jungle, right? And it behaves like jungle. And each one of those terrain types has rules associated with it. Sometimes they're very simple rules, like hedges and open fields and wheat fields and stuff like that, or orchards. And other times there's like a page of rules in tiny type about that particular weird desert terrain type or whatever it is. So by eliminating all of that and just creating maps that don't have any of those and scenarios that don't use those weird rules, you boil a lot of the complexity away. There's not, if you just look at the infantry actions, there's very little actually that starter kit has that is missing from what full ASL has, right? There's bypass movement, snipers, and concealment are the big things. Everything else is very minor, or is situational depending on the scenario, where you have like multi-level buildings and things like that. We tend not to see that in starter kit either. But again, it just controls that by not including those in the scenarios, and boils that whole 500-page, whatever it is, rule book down to 24 pages, I think is what it is.
So what's the big whoop?
Which whoop are we talking about?
In terms of a difficulty, lifestyle. Oh my God, this is too. Like what Matthew says here. It's so realistic. It's unrealistic.
You know what? I'm going to say that I don't think ASL is all that realistic. To be completely honest, it plays well, but there is a big difference between me and random Columbus person sitting down and playing ASL, and me going to like a major ASL event and playing it with the hardcore guys, right? Because A, I'll get completely smoked, and B, I don't have the rules knowledge to compete with those individuals, right? Because for them, it is the game that they play. It is. I use the term lifestyle game a little differently than some people do. I use it to mean a game that is rich enough that you could make it your entire hobby and not get bored with it or sick of it in short order. And ASL is that kind of game. It is enough because you could just do that and never get bored with it. There's such a huge, there's tens of thousands of scenarios now from all the different third-party publishers too. I have no idea what that number is, but it's an insane number.
One real quick thing about the concept of realism. So if somebody says, "Hey, I want to play a tactical war game," we can say objectively there is a spectrum of complexity, not realism, complexity, that you can choose from. With ASL being a one end, and then there's There's combat commander, and then there's conflict of heroes, and there's no shortage of options, right? And we can objectively tell you, where do you want to be in this complexity spectrum? Try this game, right? And if you don't like this game, you just go one way or the other in the complexity spectrum. The idea that any of those, regardless of their complexity, is more or less realistic is, in my opinion, just a flawed debate. It's like, what is a war game, right? Like, we can debate it. It's ultimately subjective, and none of them are realistic, right? Just because it's more complex doesn't mean it's more realistic.
That is completely true. I mean, another really, really complicated game is Starfleet Battles, right? In some sense, that's probably realistic, but not in any sense of the term that I would use. And it's very complicated. But it's also like ASL in that you don't need to know that entire rule book to play it. It just happens not to have a one little $20 box you can buy that has 6 nice little easy scenarios in it. Or maybe it does. I don't know. I haven't bought a Starfleet Battles product in a long, long, long time.
Peter asks a question, and I'm sure it's not directed to me. That's for sure.
Hey, good question. That is a Pacific rule. Everybody hates the cave rules, though. Everybody I talk to hates the cave rules. So
I don't even know what he's talking about.
Probably the answer is no. I'm not familiar with the Germans hiding out in iron mines in Normandy. I mean, that may well have happened. I haven't read about that. But so what he means is that there are cave rules, which are universally considered to be a pain in the ass in ASL, but those rules are Pacific Theater rules. They are found in the theater, in the chapter with the Pacific Theater stuff. Shouldn't we use those cave rules for cave actions in Normandy too? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough about the engagement to say whether that's sensible or not. But on the face of it, it's a legit question.
So it's ASL is not as nitpicky in regards to caves. This is an iron mine cave. What about a salt mine?
Is there extra shrapnel because it is an iron mine?
What about a salt mine cave? Is there a difference? No.
Right. Do you have to roll for dehydration if it is a salt mine?
No, but I'm asking all realism. I'm asking.
What about the canary? I mean, so yeah, it's ASL can get lost in those kind of weeds, and at least in some cases, probably to its detriment as a game. I think even like the hardcore ASL people would agree with that, actually, and that they would probably find some piece of the rules, whether it's the airdrop rules or the caves or the sewer rules or whatever, that they don't like and don't think work particularly well.
Lead magnet Pacific is wet caves. All the premium caves are dry because the rules are wrong. But you see what I'm saying?
That calls for a humidification check.
Yeah, well, it's not that ridiculous, right?
I'm making fun of it in a loving way.
Humidification check. Well, the gunpowder is affected.
They're sealed. I think they're sealed cartridges at the time. I could be wrong.
So, but here's the thing, right? No other game provides that tactical level depth of complexity of rules, and if people want that,
yeah, that's actually a great point. Because of that, whether you or I or whoever likes that, I think it's a good idea or not, aside, that fact alone makes it a unique experience, at least potentially a unique experience.
Yeah,
and there are other games that I have a really high regard for it that don't necessarily provide me with a really unique experience that I can't get somewhere else. An example would be Stalingrad 42, right? Fabulous game. I like it a ton. I like the whole series. I like the designer. I buy everything the designer does. It is a game that I can get a similar experience with a dozen other games, right? Europa is another one. It is a game that provides a unique experience. At least the East Front Europa really provides you with a scale that you're not getting elsewhere. In ASL's case, it does it just by sheer mass of rules, and you can bludgeon your opponent with the rule book if you feel the need. So
now, there are different tactical systems. Yes.
It's a very crowded space, actually. World War II tactical at the squad level specifically, maybe because of the popularity of ASL. It's a very crowded space.
Probably because of the popularity of ASL. I guess, and I'm going to say something real stupid. They dumbed it down so I can play but no, they didn't dumb it down. They just didn't include that type of detail. What about Panzer Grenadier or Advanced Tobruk system?
So I've never played the Advanced Tobruk system. I had to look at the website and was thoroughly confused by it. I have played Panzer Grenadier. I bounced off of it fairly hard. It is a platoon level game, and I believe it to be too simple while simultaneously not being easy enough to play despite its simplicity, if that makes any sense. I think there's a certain rules mass that it has, and I don't think I'm getting anything for as complicated a game as it is. Not that it's particularly complicated.
That's an extremely important point, right? If you're going to go in, like, I'm cool with a complex game, that's great, but man, they better deliver, right? Like, there better be a payoff.
Yeah, you have to feel like you're getting your brain cells worth out of that complexity. And I didn't think that, despite the fact that it's not particularly complicated, I didn't think Panzer Grenadier was really doing that for me. Again, there's people that love Panzer Grenadier. It's got a wonderful community hub website, the name of which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a huge scenario database, and people record their plays. People love that game system. It just didn't work for me.
Now, in terms of hierarchy, in terms of respect from the wargaming community, I guess ASL would be right up there. Where would a system like Lock and Load come in?
I've played Lock and Load Tactical in the World War II edition, and it was actually before the combined rule book, whatever that's called, came out. But I don't think it made huge changes, and I liked it. I liked what I saw of it. It's definitely, at the level at which I played it, it's definitely way simpler than ASL. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I was searching for an ASL alternative at one point, thinking along those lines that, hey, this is really complicated. I'm not sure it's worth it. I'm going to go investigate alternatives. So in the span of a year, I played Conflict of Heroes, I played Combat Commander, I played Panzer Grenadier, I played Lock and Load Tactical, I played Old School Tactical, and of all of those, I decided to stick with ASL. But of all the other ones, I liked Lock and Load Tactical the most.
Now, it's funny you said if it's not complicated, you're not interested. That's not
what I said, and that's not necessarily true. But there has to be there should be alignment between the complexity level of the game and the ease of play and the amount of detail that the rules are providing for me. So another example might be a game I've also talked about not liking, Day of Days, the standard combat series game, Day of Days, which is the big 5-map Normandy invasion game.
This is an MMP.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And it's the core. I forget how many pages the game-specific rules are, but the core rules are like 7 pages, okay? The series rules are like 7 pages. It's extremely simple. But then on the other hand, you have 4 or 5 or 6, maybe 8 pages of game-specific rules that deal with the landings and the airdrops and all that stuff. But then you play this game out, and it's like there's a discrepancy there between I have all this stuff to move, but the mechanics aren't really telling me anything, and I feel like I'm playing the mechanics rather than playing the situation. Because there's a mismatch between the level of detail that the simulation wants to provide based on the scale of the game and what the mechanics are actually giving me. I felt like there was a mismatch there, and that's why I didn't care for Day of Days. You could take the complete opposite SCS game, same game system, the Mighty Endeavor, which is like a divisional level, invasion of Normandy to the end of the war type game, which is a great game, and which I liked a ton because I think the mechanics and the theme and the scale are not in conflict. They're in harmony at that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah. David, you're not an MMP type designer, a guy. Is there a reason why the games that you do first of all, it's incredible that you have a skill to make games simple in terms of rules. What I'm trying to say is that, do you avoid complications, or are you faced with complications and you work them out?
No, I mean, for sure, I'm a simple kind of guy. I answered this question recently. I forget what, I was on a podcast, and the answer is, my preference is to try to be as elegant / streamlined with the rules and deep with the gameplay as possible, right? That's kind of cliche, and everybody probably strives for that. That's my general approach. When I do, the only exception to that would be some of the solitaire war game stuff that I do that people might be familiar with, where I will do the core design. Again, I'll try to be as elegant and streamlined with it as I can be, and then whatever the situation, because they're all like very tactical narrative situations, I'll layer in Chrome rules at the end that try to tie back into the core system as much as possible, right? So because I know that, that's what I'm trying to deliver. That's what I think people would expect from those type of experiences, is whatever the narrative is, right? So I'm in that regard, I'm okay with adding a little extra complexity with Chrome.
The hardest thing, so I have zero design experience and certainly no design authority in the wargaming space, but I have designed RPGs, and the hardest thing is keeping it simple.
Yeah.
You can always play it and say, hey, I really would like this to be represented in this game, and add a rule for that. You can do that to the end of time, and that's how we get games like ASL and Starfleet Battles and stuff. Making it simpler is much more challenging from a design perspective.
Yeah. I mean, one for sure, and I always say that I will model the game I'm designing right around whatever the historical event is, but the model is not trying to model the historical event. It's modeling the key narrative elements I want the game to evoke. So I'm not trying to give the player the ability to recreate everything. I just want them to be able to experience the key things that I think are the most important elements to take away from it. Because Artie's right. If I was trying to throw everything in there, it's going to be 7,000-page rule book, and
And I'm going to say something about that. So basically, and I'm just putting it out there. So David Townsend is an incredibly smart designer, because he works through all the complications. So the designers for MMP will just throw anything in and not work it out.
They have a different design goal. They have a very different design goal.
I'm just putting it out there.
That's probably true. I mean, I am going to differ with that only in the sense of calling out MMP specifically.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of different designers with a bunch of different design philosophies work for MMP. The same thing with GMT. There are absolutely designers that GMT publishes that do exactly that thing too.
Yeah.
But like David says, it might not be that their design goals are the same thing.
Exactly. Right, 100%. When you're designing for ASL, you are not designing. You're designing to try to be as simulationist or whatever word you want to use. It's just a completely different design goal, design philosophy, 100%. So there is no right or wrong, right? I mean, there are bad games, but saying that I'm trying to be as simulationist as possible in my approach to this event is not right or wrong.
Well, I mean, you have to. So, I mean, the first step, of course, is going to be to decide what your design goals are, right? Yeah, if you just want to say, because I mean, I fell into this, right? I want to make a game like X and not have a clear sense of what I'm trying to do with the game system. But I have this sort of expansive idea of what I am trying to emulate. That is a surefire recipe for a game that either is going to be a total disaster or, in my case, never sees the light of day.
Look, we're coming close to the end. As a matter of fact, it's about 30 seconds close to the end, because I want to keep this for an hour. It's just a little conversation we're having. Artie, do you want to have a subject next week? Like, I was thinking the NATO symbols, if you can clarify some NATO symbols.
Well, since we have brought that up multiple times, yes, let's start with NATO symbols.
Okay, but it's so this next week or whenever we do this again, I'm saying next week, it's on your side, right?
Sure, we can do it that way. I've got a StreamYard account too.
Okay, good. Yeah, Dave, I got $200 a year. I didn't even know. You know this. You know what I'm saying? I get an email and it's like I'm trying to do my budget, and all of a sudden it's like you've just been charged $200 US, as a matter of fact, because StreamYard. Whoa! They didn't give me the option.
They even charged you in real money.
They didn't, they didn't give me the option to opt out. It's just like, there you go. It's charged. Hey, you're good for another year.
Yeah, I got the free account. I don't do as much with StreamYard though. So
yeah,
I did make the decision to not do that.
Okay, so you know what, Artie? I'm gonna pick your brain on NATO symbols. And David, if you want to pop by. You're more than welcome, man. Mark Herman was supposed to show up.
Man, you guys got the JV team on that one. Holy oh, man.
I don't know what's. I mean, he lives in New York. It's the same time as me. No,
I don't think he's in New York anymore. Is he? I thought he was somewhere on the West Coast or something like that.
Oh shit!
Is that
so?
right?
It's like 1 in the afternoon where Mark's at in Hawaii or wherever it is.
He's gonna come in and say, "Where the hell are they?" Anyways.
But that's okay because he'll blame you, Dan.
Yeah, he will, obviously. So look, okay, let's clarify some NATO symbols for me. I'd love to do that.
Okay, we'll make that our topic.
You're talking mole symbology, right? Like unit symbol. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What wargamers call the NATO symbols, which is not really you're aware, not really what it is.
Hold on. What did David just say?
It's what we call mole symbology. MOLE. Yeah.
MOLE.
Yeah.
What's mole about that?
Oh, I don't even know what it stands for. Jeez, that's what happens. That's what happens when you live something your whole life and you never think about it. I don't know. It's a military standard. But yeah, Artie's right. I mean, you'll hear it called NATO symbols, mole symbology. That's because it's all standardized to U.S. and NATO standards. Right?
Well, tell me, I want to be cool. What's cooler?
Of those two?
Yeah.
In the hobby, we call them NATO symbols.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
So
nobody knows what mole is. So yeah, there you go.
And here you go, Robert Carroll. What's with the hour limit? Just getting because people have lives, Robert. You know what I'm saying? For God's sake, man. Anyways, David, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Artie, for doing this, man. This
Thanks
is
for having me.
Man.
Thanks, David, for stopping in.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks.
Look, I'm saying next week. Are we going to do one next week?
Sure. Let's shoot for next Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or we're in Standard Time.
Okay.
I'll send around an actual invitation.
Okay.
From the StreamYard.
That's right. It's you're the guy in charge next week, right? So you're gonna have
sure. Yep. I'll have a link and everything.
All right.
Ahead of the time.
So if David Thompson wants to come in, you have to send him the link.
That's fine. I don't. You may have to send it to him because I may not have your email address, David. I might, but I might not.
We'll fix that.
All right.
Okay. So thank you very much, chat. Thank you, Dave, for coming along.
That was great, guys. Thanks for letting me drop in.
Thanks for being the brains, and I got the looks.
That's only because Mark Herman wasn't here.
But at 7. Anyways, I can't believe. I thought he was in New York, man.
So next week, I had to scramble to eat before we did this weekend. I will. I found a place that delivers. It's like an Uber Eats thing. They deliver poutine. So I'm going to have poutine delivered for next week's affair. And it's going to be amazing.
That's hilarious. Now, hold on a second.
Yeah, you're in Columbus, Ohio. You never thought.
Well, what the patrons of the restaurant, what are their last names?
I don't know, actually. It's like something in Pierogi House.
Pierogi House?
Yeah, something like East European stuff. But they have poutine too. So
there's no East European poutine.
Well, it is because they put goulash. They have a poutine with goulash on it. Actually, it's pretty great.
Really?
To be honest, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't say. I mean, it said Columbus, Ohio. We'll take what we could get. Okay, when it comes to fine Quebecois cuisine. So.
See, he's knocking Columbus, Ohio. I'm in Dayton, Ohio. Columbus is like the metropolitan.
That's true. You have a fabulous Air Force museum, however.
That is true. It's unbelievable. That is true.
Once a year at the Dayton, the U.S. Air Force's actual main museum, they actually have, I forget what day. David probably knows what day this is, where they have the World War I day, where they land the biplanes, the Sopwith camels and stuff out on the lawn out front. That's got to be amazing. This is embarrassing. I haven't actually seen it. I'll have to go. I've gone to the museum tons of times, but I haven't seen that. So I forget what day. It's a specific day that they do that on every year, and who knows? It's probably canceled now.
Talking about museums, did you ever see that guy Dragon Man?
Dragon Man.
Really? The biggest private museum you can have, and it's in Colorado, something Springs, Colorado Springs.
Dragon.
Yeah, Dragon.
I have no idea.
You're kidding.
And is it a dragon museum?
No, this guy's a military museum, man. It's insane.
And he's called Dragon Man?
I think it's Dragon something. Yeah, he's like, Yahoo! He's got a shooting range.
Okay.
Check it out.
Well, this is America. There's a shooting range literally on in fact, on certain weeknights right out here, there's a shooting range. So I mean, that does happen from time to time, but there's places you can go down in Kentucky where you can shoot flamethrowers and bazookas and 50 cals and all that stuff. So, I mean, I have no doubt that this experience is available somewhere here in the United States.
We're not even allowed to shoot spray paint guns, whatever you call them, bazookas.
Order is kept by the Mounties, I am told. But yes, bazookas.
Bazooka.
First of all, who owns live ammo from a bazooka?
I have no idea.
Where do you get it?
I have no idea. Then you can there's the thing where you can drive a tank around and shoot paint tank rounds at other people driving tanks.
Yeah.
So,
paint.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're not live tank rounds because that would be short-lived.
I'd be into that. Check out Dragon Man.
I'm thinking if I search for Dragon Man, I'm going to get a bunch of D&D people and a character from Marvel Comics called Dragon Man. I think that's what I'm going to get.
Well, look, you will not believe the amount of equipment this guy's got. I think he's got the biggest Zyklon B collection in the world. To tell you that he buys everything by himself, man. Everything's legit. He's got tanks. Right. He's got tanks, man. He's got huge.
The point at which we're talking about this gentleman's Zyklon B collection is the point at which I have officially checked out. I am, in fact, now not going to investigate Dragon Man and his collection.
All right. I'm going to play the intro for the outro again. And you know what, people? Don't even stick around. Get lost. Thanks, man.
Everybody have a great night.